Ottawa is giving a $1 billion lifeline to industries most impacted by U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. $1.5 billion of federal funding will go towards helping Canada's steel and aluminum and copper industries. That includes $1 billion for a loan program through the Business Development Bank of Canada and an additional $500 million to the Regional Tariff Response Initiative to help small and medium-sized businesses make what the government is calling strategic pivots in the face of Donald Trump's tariffs. Those tariffs currently amount to 50% for Canadian steel, aluminum, and copper products, and 25% tariffs for products that use derivatives of those materials. For more on these new measures, I'm joined now live in the studio by Industry Minister Mélanie Joly. Minister, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time today.
Good to see you. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much. The funding you've announced is already on top of the billions that has been put out there. What difference do you think this $1.5 billion, mostly in credit, will make?
Well, because we're reacting to a new interpretation by the White House of their steel, aluminum, and copper tariffs. And so beginning of April, the White House decided to change their interpretation. It's, as Catherine was mentioning a bit earlier, it's based on the entire value of the product that is being exported rather than the value, the amount of steel or aluminum or copper on a given product. And so that has consequences. And in the circumstances, we need to be there for our businesses as they're struggling with the impacts of tariffs. And so you were mentioning that we're providing loans. Well, I would like just to make clear to our viewers right now that this is liquidity support. It's 0% interest loans for the first year. And then second and third year, because these are 3 years loan, it will be very low interest. And actually, companies don't need to pay the capital for 3 years. They only need to pay the interest. So basically for the first year, nothing. And that will help them keep their workers, keep their suppliers, and ultimately it will protect them. And meanwhile, they will have to pay the entire amount at the end of the 3 years. But we'll see where we're at. But we will maybe be in a new reality in the U.S. But meanwhile, we needed to provide predictability to our businesses, and that's why we came up with this 3-year very favorable loan facility.
Predictability is hard to come by in this particular age for a lot of Canadian businesses. And what does it say to you that you have to roll out yet another support program? And I'm not saying this is a bad move by any stretch of the imagination, but the persistence of the U.S. on this, the changing of how they calculate the tariffs to make it even more onerous and more punishing for Canadian industry.
So we went through this during the first Turmp mandate, particularly on steel and aluminum. So, a lot of the businesses and people in the sector have experience. But of course, the 232 tariffs are widening. It's not only on Canada, it's on the rest of the world. So let's remember that is affecting even countries that actually have deals with the U.S.
Well, the European Union signed an agreement, and they've now been hit with 25% on cars and other things, right? So there are no deals with this administration right now.
I've been saying it time and time again, the PM, Prime Minister Carney as well. There are lots of things we can't control, and we can't control what's going on in the White House. But there are things we can control, and what we do here at home is about actually helping our businesses. We are providing liquidity support. We're providing also support for capital expenditure, so for them to continue to invest in their businesses, to buy equipment. Because what we want to protect the workers. At the same time, we need to make sure that there's no over-dependency on the U.S. market.
Sure.
And so for these businesses to be able to continue to thrive, they need to be able to reach new markets, develop new products. And that's the entire industrial strategy we're putting into place.
But what about over-dependency on government support, right? Because you get into a situation where you cannot pivot steel quickly, right? It is going to take some time, and we have as a government and as a country had to keep extending support to these industries while also trying to build the military and do other things. I mean, what are the limits of your ability to support these industries? Because it is billions of dollars. I'm not saying they're not worthy of support, but there does become a limit of how far people can go.
Well, we'll be there as tariffs are there. So we will be there. These workers, these businesses are on the front lines of the trade war.
But what if tariffs become permanent with the United States? Because that's where the president wants to go. Right.
The president is there now, and we'll see what happens in the next administration. Okay, so that's why we're dealing with the world as it is now. But we know that a lot of these protectionist measures may continue in time. So that's why I'm saying to you that we need to help these businesses pivot. You know, I'll give you an example. If you look at the steel plants in Canada, mainly those in Ontario, Algoma, Dofasco, ArcelorMittal Dofasco in Hamilton. For a long, long time, their entire business model was based on being able to send on the other side of the border steel for the automakers. Now, with 50% tariffs against that type of steel, it's very difficult to do so. So what are they doing now? Well, Algoma Steel is working on doing the type of business, the type of steel for infrastructure work, or also for defense. Dofasco has been really working also with tin can makers to be able to do our entire tin cans here in Canada, rather than depending on the US. On the aluminum front, the businesses, actually Rio Tinto, who owns a major assets, but also Alcoa and Alouette, have been profiting from the increased amount of price of aluminum. But those who are really, really impacted right now are the small and medium-sized businesses, because there's no transformation of aluminum in Canada. It's all made in the US. And so we're working to bring a rolling mill to Canada to transform that aluminum. That way, it won't be going back and forth on both sides of the border, and ultimately, it's always more tariff, and it's Canadian consumers that are affected when they buy their new windows to renovate their homes, or doors, or different types of products.
Even a can of beer, as Doug Ford likes to talk about all the time.
So we need to make sure that we're creating these sovereign capabilities, as we say in our jargon in Ottawa, because we need to be able to transform that type of aluminum.
But you talked today in laying out the credit facility that in the short term it's about helping secure the workers, right? To keep them attached to their companies to get through this point in time. In the medium term is about diversifying the markets. And the long term is about building the domestic
I'm happy
demand
you're listening
and
when I
industrial.
talk. Thank you.
Right. But help me to understand what you mean by short, medium, and long term, because there's the news cycle of those terms, the political cycle of those terms, and the business cycle of those terms.
Well,
short-term Trump, or is that medium term?
No, short-term is in terms of months, and then medium term is much more in terms of years, and longer term is many years. So that's why, if you're an owner of auto parts shop right now, a plant, you know that you need liquidity now. And that's why you need to be able to go somewhere to get your support. And that's why you'll go depending on where you are. For example, Southwestern Ontario, FedDev will be there to support you. If you are, working in the steel sector and you're really, really impacted for the first time with tariffs, you'll go see the BDC, or you'll go see your regional development agency, which may be FedDev or DEC in Quebec, or ACOA in
but are we talking like
Atlantic Canada.
3 years for diversification, 5 years for diversification?
No, it needs to go faster.
I know it's different from company to company,
needs to
but
go
what are we talking
faster,
about?
because obviously entrepreneurs cannot just continue to add more debt. They need to be able to be profitable. That's how they will be able to get to a sustainable business. Our job is to help them bridge that risk-taking of changing their business model, of changing, either investing in new products, or either being able to get to new markets. And that's why the Prime Minister is around the world opening also new markets. That's also, we're working on creating a stronger domestic market. And so it's all that we're doing. And meanwhile, I must say, what I've been working a lot with the EU as well is, as we're seeing all these trade deals being done, but fundamentally, there's protectionism happening all around the world. So we need to align, and it's pretty much the first time in decades, our industrial policies to states, to governments that actually we see eye to eye with. So we may have a free trade agreement with Europe, but then they come up with steel tariffs. We need to make sure that we align our steel policy and aluminum policy to be closer together.
Right, countries with multilateralism
Yeah,
in their
exactly.
DNA. But look, there was you know, you heard Catherine Cobden on the show earlier.
Yeah.
She was, this will be helpful. They want to see more work on derivative tariffs. David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, though, was concerned by what he saw as a missing piece today, and that was support for the softwood lumber industry. He felt they were left out of today's announcement. I just want to play a clip from the Premier of BC and get your reaction on the other side. Have a listen to this.
Yet again, softwood lumber has been left off the list as a tariff-affected industry. I don't know what it's going to take, really, to get the bureaucrats and the ministers in Ottawa to recognize that softwood lumber employs more people in Canada than steel and auto parts combined. The industry needs as much support as industries that are located closer to Ottawa.
Okay, you're not a bureaucrat, but you know, you are part of the industrial response team. I know you said today you were talking to the forestry and lumber sectors. When will we see something, or will we see something on that?
Listen, I have a very good relationship with Premier Eby. He's right. We need to offer the same type of conditions to the steel, aluminum, and copper sectors than to the forestry and softwood lumber, and that's exactly why we're working on that. And we will make sure that there's a level playing field for all the different sectors.
So it's coming for them, and just the details may be different?
And I'll be engaging with him and his team, and with Ravi Kalyan, also my counterpart. It's just that it's different type of tariffs that are affecting
They're
the
not
sectors.
232s,
They're
right?
not
They're not the national
tariffs,
security tariffs.
But, you know, fundamentally, he makes a very important point. And so, of course, we will be working on offering the same type of conditions. That's why I've opened up the window of opportunity this morning while I was announcing the investments, because, of course, our goal is to make sure that may you work as a worker, may you be on Vancouver Island working on the forestry sector and really impacted by the tariffs, or in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, you know, in Quebec in the aluminum front, or in Windsor, Ontario in the steel sector. All that is really important. All these workers are really important, and so we need to be able to protect them.
So does that mean credit facilities, loan sort of favorable terms for forestry and lumber? Is that what we're talking about here?
So there's different things. The forestry sector and the softwood lumber sector have already been added to the $500 million support that we're giving through the Regional Development Agency. So for Premier Eby and his province, it would be through Pacifican. So that has already been done. I don't think he's been briefed yet, but I'll be able to talk to him about it, no problem. But what we need to be able to work on is the $1 billion support through the BDC. And that needs to be done, and of course, we'll make it happen.
Industry Minister Mélanie Joly, I know it's been a busy day. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Well, look, the federal government has introduced a new tariff support package for the hardest hit industries in this trade war with the United States, announcing $1.5 billion in new loans and grants for the steel, aluminum, and copper sectors. This funding comes as a response to U.S. President Donald Trump tightening his grip on sectoral tariffs, extending the Section 232 tariffs to even more products, a move that hurts an already reeling sector. Now, since the start of the trade war, the steel sector alone has had more than 1,000 layoffs. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly was asked today if she thinks these tariffs will be in place forever.
You don't know, I don't know. So this is not up to us to answer that question, because these decisions will be taken south of our border. Meanwhile, we just don't sit idle waiting for things to happen. We act. And that's why today we announced $1.5 billion.
Okay, that was Industry Minister Mélanie Joly. She'll join us in just a little bit on the show. But right now we have Catherine Cobden, who is the president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association. Catherine Cobden, good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, David.
I want to get to the announcement in just a second, but you know, I think the last time we spoke, there were measures taken to help the steel industry, and you thought it gave you a fighting chance, but here we are.
Yes.
Back again with the need for more aid. Well, what is it about the state of the industry right now that requires this?
Yeah, well, the tariffs are definitely taking their toll, David. It's been over 14 months now, and we've seen not just the tariffication of the steel industry, but as you're described, we're seeing an expansion of these tariffs into our Canadian customer base. So those customers that we sold to here in Canada are now seeing a tightening of the screws of U.S. tariffs on their products. So it's having a very, it's a compiling effect.
Compounding, yes.
Yeah, compounding effect.
So they're going
yes.
after derivatives and things that use Canadian steel. It's a little, help me if maybe
Yes,
I'm wrong here,
correct.
but I remember with the auto thing, it was like you had to determine what percentage of the car was non-U.S. made, and you were tariffed on that. Is that what they're doing with steel now?
So what they've done in steel is originally they said it would be the percentage of steel in the product.
Yes.
But as of a month ago, they've determined that they will charge the tariffs on the full value of the product, regardless of how much steel. So for example, if you have a wooden desk with steel rails, you're going to get tariffed on the steel rail originally. Now you're going to get tariffed on the whole value of the desk.
Is that predatory capitalism and pressure by the United States, or is it because it was just too difficult to do the calculations on the smaller bit-by-bit components? Because that's almost like a non-tariff barrier in
It
some
was
ways.
an extremely complex program to administer, and as I understand it, the USTR spent countless weeks and months to determine how they would make their changes to the administration. So the administration of these derivative tariffs. So I don't think this was I think this was a complex series of objectives, but indeed it is one that is taking its toll on the industry and frankly all of our value chain.
So what was announced today is $1.5 billion for the Business Development Bank of Canada at loans, more liquidity essentially at preferential rates. But if the value chain is getting hammered and is taking a toll on the business, and I'm not trying to knock down the benefits of this, but the idea of taking on more debt, even if it is at a preferential rate, I mean, that is a tough spot for your members to be in, is it not?
I think what we're looking at is, are all the pieces in place? So this was an important piece to help those companies that need the immediacy of the support. But it's certainly not the only measure that's required. And as we have discussed before in the past, there's been a step-by-step sort of approach that the government's taken to address a variety of things, including in November, they did announce, the federal government announced derivative tariffs at 25% on a narrowly defined list of derivatives. So this is not a new issue. What is new is it's getting more complicated and it's getting more impactful, and so we need to actually take additional measures. So the liquidity supports, the supports to pivot the businesses, all of that is really, really welcome. And some members of ours, as well as some of our customers, will take advantage of those. But we do have additional steps that we need to have taken.
Well, the pivot the businesses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, because the minister talked a bit about this today, and we're going to ask her about this when she comes into the studio. Short term, keep the workforces intact. Medium term, pivot the businesses, essentially diversify markets. Long term, build up the domestic industry that would replace some of the demand. How do you get to that medium term? Because the fact that the U.S. is changing this even now suggests that this is a persistent, ongoing policy objective of the Trump administration. And for a minimum of 3 years, you're going to have to live with this.
Yeah, so I think the president has made his objectives clear from the get-go, and sadly, we are living through exactly what his objectives were at that time. So I think the strategy that we've been on as a country as well as an industry is to pivot hard to what we can control. And so, whether it's liquidity supports for our customers, whether it's, tariffs at the border that help keep, dump steel out of the market, we would like to see now new tariffs introduced on derivatives of these downstream products. We did a first step in November. It's time to take the next step. But, this is just going to be kind of a step-by-step approach where we do what we can to control the situation, knowing full well that the U.S.-Canada relationship, it would appear anyway, that it's up to the President of the United States to determine.
But what is the medium term? Like, what's the horizon for a pivot, right? Because, we think certainly in news cycles and political cycles, but the business cycle is a totally different, calendar in a lot of cases. It is turning an ocean liner as opposed to, doing a three-point turn in a car. So, like, what are we talking about here? Like, how long do you think we're going to need to provide liquidity and other supports to these sectors as a government?
Well, that's also why we need these additional measures like things at the border, because they essentially help us move faster. They help the pivot along in a faster, accelerated way, because we don't have an infinite amount of time. Frankly, what we're living through right now is unsustainable. So we need those the full suite of the toolkit to pivot as fast as possible. And you know, since we last spoke, those measures that were announced, they are having an effect. We saw 1 million tons less imported steel in our market. Now, mind you, we've lost 4 million tons of access to the U.S. market and heading towards 6 million, but certainly happier to have 1 million tons of space to work with in Canada, and you know, and hope more to come.
The net on that is still pretty grim.
It is still pretty grim.
Like Algoma's Q4 numbers saw its shipments down 31%, right? Like when a company like Algoma loses a third, that's real money.
Well, and I don't want to suggest it isn't anything but grim. We've had significant job losses, which is just a terrible situation. We've lost customers. We are trying our best to pivot as fast as possible. I'm only saying that we need a comprehensive suite of tools to do that, including these types of supports. And, you know, and the innovative power and resiliency of the sector. You know, they've got a can-do attitude, even despite the very difficult circumstances that we're facing.
But, you know, this is obviously driven and fueled by the current occupant of the Oval Office, right? There's no question this is Donald Trump's agenda. But, you know, as this persists, and we're only a little over a year into it. You know, it's like dog years, but we're a year into it. This concept, though, takes root in the American political culture, right? So there's no guarantee that, you know, if there's a change in the occupancy in the White House, it slingshots back to normal, right? So
yeah, it's a challenge.
How does the industry view that on the horizon? Because you see steel sector, you know, lobby groups in the U.S. pushing to keep going and go faster.
Yeah, no, they certainly are. And so for us, the most important strategy is to align as much as possible with the steel trade policies. So do our part to keep Chinese steel imports down, to keep offshore dump steel imports down, and to demonstrate to the U.S. that, in fact, we're the best partner. They are still 26 million tons of steel short. So they need to get steel from somewhere. Currently, their prices are on a tear. They're 40% higher in that market. I think eventually there has to be a window that opens up that says we actually need some support from somewhere. And I really hope that they pivot to Canada, who can demonstrate, you know, all the things we have done to meet them step by step by step to create a perimeter of trade.
Well, look, steel, oil, aluminum, all up, you know, prices all up in the United States. But just as a quick final point, you say you need that comprehensive suite of programs. Do you have that now with this? Like, I know you have tariff measures, anti-dumping measures, you know, reciprocal tariffs and liquidity and aid. Where are you in the package?
We're looking for one more very comprehensive thing very urgently, which is to take the derivative tariffs, expand the list of coverage, and increase the tariff rate. And then keep implementing all the other things that have been announced as fast as possible, like the Buy Canadian policy, for
So some more retaliatory action, essentially, against the United States.
Well, no, these derivative tariffs would apply to all products produced with steel that are coming into Canada. It's basically to ensure a level playing field within our Canadian market, to give our Canadian customers access to domestic market that today they don't have access to.
Okay. Catherine Cobden, President and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association. Well, I always appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.